Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, and I have a great guest. His name is Mr. John Turner. He is the Chief Revenue Officer for a company called FinancialForce. They're at www.financialforce.com. We're going to talk about talking to executives from a sales perspective, if you will. We're trying to get to the executive. We're trying to have conversations with the executives. And we're wanting to sell to these CEOs and other senior level executives. What do we need to prioritize in their eyes? In other words, we may want to prioritize what we want to sell from our positioning, but what do we need to prioritize in their eyes? How do we do it? How do we go about it? And what is the most successful way and the way not to do so? So I think you'll find this invaluable. Please take an instrument for writing notes or recording notes. This is going to be a great masterclass in how to talk to CEOs and senior executive level people and how to get through the door and sell to them. Without further ado, let's go speak with John. Hey, John, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure being here, Doug, and been looking forward to this conversation.
So, John, I know you've had a lot of experience, 20 plus years in the software development industry, decades of experience in the sales, and I'll call it talent development because we discussed that at one point. And you have a real big passion for building championship teams, unlocking talent. I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to talk about a lot of people come and they'll send questions in like, what is the priority that I should be focused on? I'm trying to reach executives in larger organizations, for example, CEOs. What's the priority that they're really focused on?
Well, it's such a great question because it's something that I'm trying to teach my sales organization, because I think particularly in the way that the world has changed now, prioritization is going to come much more into focus and be something that's going to be important for salespeople. So the way I lead and the way that I lead the business is I typically have anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 priorities for the organization over the year. These are the things that I absolutely make sure that I have to execute upon. Those are typically things that are agreed upon, that I agree upon with the CEO and the board. I think in the past, particularly in the past few years, you could do a project or you could get to somebody without having it be a 1, 2, or 3 priority project to the company. And you could probably sell something and have someone make a decision. I think what's happened now is if you're not a 1, 2, or 3 priority, you're probably not going to get the attention of an executive, and you're surely not going to get into a sales cycle with an executive. So, an example of one of my big priorities here at FinancialForce is enabling and really training and teaching the sales organization on how to sell, how to manage, how to run a process. There's just a lot of running key plays. There's a lot of enablement that needs to go on here for our future. It's a high priority that I've agreed upon with the board and also with the CEO and in my organization. It's one of my top 3. As a result, I've brought on 2 new vendors, 2 new providers who I've worked with in the past. They were shorter sales cycles because they were tied into something that was such a high priority. So what I'm teaching my organization is understand what are the 1, 2, 3 priorities for a company and for the CEO, the board, and the executives you're speaking to. If you don't know whether you're fitting into one of those priorities, you probably don't have a deal or an opportunity that you're going to be really able to forecast. And that's probably one of the reasons why deals are slipping, is because when we trace it back to were you really tied into a high priority for the company, and an executive has told you that, we're not, more often than not, or in many cases, we're not tied into that, which is why the decisions are getting pushed. That might have been a yes a year ago.
So let's say that I'll play, I'm sales rep, right? I'll play sales rep here, work for your company or work for any company at this point. Do I find this information prior to discovery? And if so, how do I?
Yeah, you should do your homework. So, when I'm coaching my team, for instance, my own situation, I started 120 days ago. FinancialForce has been around 12 to 13 years. We're in a competitive growth industry, and there's priorities that any new executive is going to have. Often it's get to know the organization. In some cases, there might be a growth mandate, which I think you could probably guess that me coming on board with my background, my mandate is going to be to grow the company in a predictable manner, probably in some future point of going IPO, things like that. So I would just say that if you're going to approach an executive at a company, look at the background of where the company is, where you think the executive is. I think new executives and people come on board are a great opportunity to have a point of view of what their priorities would be, but then also ask them what are their priorities. So when I meet with executives that are new, I will say, hey, what is your mandate? What are the 3 to 5 things that you have to execute upon? And it makes it for a useful conversation. If someone's been there for a while, you can look at the company. Have there been acquisitions? Is it a growth company? Is it a company that hasn't been growing where they're probably going to need to focus on profitability? I think that's another big one actually in today's world, is profitability is going to rule the day. And so anything that you're doing that is going to tie into profitability or return on investment is probably going to get the attention of an executive. So yeah, I do the research. What is the background? I like to look at where have they come from, where have they been, what's going on with the company, and form some opinions, and then ultimately use that as a door opener to talk about bigger priorities.
Is that being done via, say, LinkedIn, industry, trade publications? Where would one look? Let's say that I'm trying to penetrate the CEO's level, the executive level of the CEO of a, software company, for example, right? Mm. Where do I start with LinkedIn? Do I start with Club? Where do I go?
Yeah. So, the first thing I do is, depending on what buying center you're targeting. So let's say this is let's say this is FinancialForce. FinancialForce, often the decision makers are either the CFO or your head of services and professional services. So I think the first thing that I would that we instruct our team is, what vertical is the company in? In this case, it's a software company. Most software companies have a services organization. Most services organizations in software companies are not run efficiently or effectively. They're managed by spreadsheets, and that creates a lot of issues around ensuring you have the right person in the right place at the right time to serve your customers. There's also a lot of revenue leakage where free services are being given out. Services are being given out that aren't billed for, or projects aren't scoped properly, and as a result, you're losing revenue, and you're also your expenses are higher. So going to in a software company where most software companies, particularly if they're pre-IPO, are under pressure around expenses and expense management and efficiency, a great way to go to the head of professional services is to look for that person in LinkedIn, look at their background. If you know somebody, obviously an introduction is going to be 100 times more effective. Also, a personalized message to that person that says, hey, I've done research on your company. I've seen that you're connected to these people. This is a common issue that companies in your industry have been facing. This is how we address it. Those are all going to have a much higher probability of responding to. So I go to LinkedIn, I go to whatever public information is available at the company, like Crunchbase or their website or press releases. Glassdoor's another way. Those are all ways that you can get a view of what's going on in the company, and then you put together a targeted message and really anticipate what the issues are. I know that when I get that type of a message where somebody has looked at my industry, looked at my company, looked at my background, and said, "Hey, I've done specific research on your company. This is our value proposition. I think you should, I'd like to show you what we're doing or have a conversation." Those are probably 1 out of 100. And sometimes they just don't hit the mark, where they've kind of looked and said, "Hey, is this a priority?" And I'll say, "Well, it's really not. Nicely done, good preparation, but it's not a priority for me." And then the 1 out of 100 where it is a priority, I'll take a look at it. But it's a lot of work and preparation work. But I think if you're going to target executives and try to get into companies like this, you've got to put that work in. You've got to put the work in.
I 100% agree with you, John. We're speaking with Mr. John Turner. He's the Chief Revenue Officer for a company called FinancialForce. They're at FinancialForce.com. We're talking about priorities of the executives, and from a sales perspective, how to actually get your foot through the door and get that conversation going to lead to the next step. John, here's what I hear. I'm hearing that priorities are really centered around things that are creating pain or other opportunities that could be achieved within the organization that sometimes is common to the industry, right? I mean, as you said, these are the common things. Or sometimes you can find this information by doing research ahead of time, which, I know, for example, John, in my sales career, I find something that was published about them and I go, wow, okay, this is a new initiative. What are the pain points around this new initiative, for example? And then I can have that conversation. Is that a great way to go for people? And the reason I'm asking that, a lot of people listening, they're like, I want to get into more of these high level, I want to get to a John Turner. I want to get to him. Yeah. So, and, John may not want to be sold to you, right? But you certainly want to buy if there's something that makes sense. So LinkedIn, are there any, you mentioned like Crunchbase and a few other things. Are there any other sources that you would say, hey, look, globally, it doesn't matter if you're manufacturing a software or whatever. Are there global resources that people should be looking at regardless?
Yeah, I think one thing I would just add to this is a level of business acumen. So when I'm looking for sales reps, I have what I call the 4 legs of a table when I'm looking for a rep. I want reps that have great traits like curiosity, competitiveness, intelligence, teamwork, team-oriented, which are kind of born with traits or you develop them over time. The second leg of the stool is business acumen. I want people to understand how a business works and what are the nuts and bolts of how a business works and how a business leader thinks. Third thing I look for is technology acumen. I want them to be comfortable using technology, but also understand the technology world because that's the world that we're in. And then the fourth thing is really process and what I call a portable sales process. Do you have a way of engaging with the prospect, running it through a process, and getting to a point where the prospect becomes a customer and ultimately becomes a satisfied customer? Those are the 4 legs that I look for. Now, you can have a table that stands with 3 of the 4 legs. Traits is a non-negotiable, but you can have a weakness in one of those areas. And if I have all 4, that's great. And the reason why I say that is that business acumen piece, understanding what's in the mind of a business leader and what's going on in today's world. So all the way from reading business journals, I read The Economist cover to cover every Saturday. I learned that from an executive. The Wall Street Journal. There's so many different business publications. Looking at the Crunchbases of the world and the LinkedIns. And then really understanding in the industry what would likely be on the mind of an executive. And if you're not sure, if you're a more inexperienced or earlier on in your career, speaking to people who are mentors or people like your sales leader or your CEO of really what are the issues that are on your mind, because they tend to have somewhat of a similarity, particularly in today's economic environment. Productivity, expense management, predictable revenue growth and bookings growth. There's some predictable kind of things that go on based on developing that business acumen that allow that you're targeting to have a higher probability of landing with an executive. And even if it doesn't, to get your foot in the door where you do get that meeting, where you have demonstrated that preparation and that connection, you'll still maybe from time to time get a meeting where the executive says, well, you were close, but not quite, but I can see where your product or solution could have an application here, which then turns into what we're teaching here, a value selling conversation about really understanding what are the priorities. What are your top three? Do we plug into those, and how do we demonstrate that?
And John, what I found also is when we're in a position, even if it's not a fit right for that person, that's a ripe time to ask for referrals to someone else.
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing loud and clear through this conversation is peer-to-peer positioning. Because when you said business acumen, part of me jumped up and down like, yay, finally someone said business acumen, right? So, because a lot of people, they don't get it. I always explain to salespeople, it's like, look, you're going into an executive relationship. You walk in, let's say 2 salespeople walk in and a sales manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
I say, basically, the C-level is looking at it like, okay, 2 possible liars and maybe 1 person who will tell me the truth.
Yeah. Unless there's a sales engineer in the room, which sales engineers never lie.
Right. So if we have this peer-to-peer positioning, and that's something I learned early on, and I'm so grateful you said to people like, look, if you don't know how to do this, there are people there that you could just take for coffee or lunch, or, if they're within your own company, they'll probably just give you their time and ask them how they think. And then you ask 10, 20 people this question in the same position, one will see overlapping themes.
Yes.
And those are usually the things that people want to talk about, or certainly you can bring. But I love this peer-to-peer positioning, because we may not, as salespeople, really get what a chief revenue officer goes through.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We might assume because we're interfacing, but we really don't know what it's like to walk in that other person's shoes. So as soon as we know how to walk in that other person's shoes, if we can speak their same language, we can have commonality, common thought process, and solve a problem or give an opportunity that they've been looking for. Then now we're peer-to-peer. And the whole conversation changes.
Yeah. It's, the other thing, Doug, that I say is just podcasts. Like this one's a great example. You speak to business leaders all the time. I mean, what a great opportunity as a salesperson, particularly, no matter where you are in your career, to hear unfiltered conversations about what business executives think about. I mean, you've started your business and you've got extensive business experience. You're an entrepreneur and you speak to other people or business leaders. I mean, this is a kind of a must listen to, because you're going to get the answer, as I like to say, the answers to the test. And, for a CRO, every CRO right now has to be looking at productivity, has to be looking at expense management, has to be looking at how do they become more predictable in how they predict growth in their business. So those are all things that if every CRO, I can't imagine one in the enterprise software business who isn't thinking about that. They probably weren't thinking about it the same way a year ago, because a year ago it was probably, I got to grow. I got to hire. I got to go. And it's evolved now into efficiency, effectiveness, predictability. And if you, like you said, in this peer-to-peer, approach, you're going to have a higher probability of speaking to that person if you're tying into those issues. If somebody sends me something unsolicited, not thought out, kind of cookie cutter that just says, hey, we can help you hire more people. Well, that's not going to get any traction with me. Now, if there's something that says, hey, I've looked at your industry, you're new in your role, the world has changed, I have a capability that can plug into your systems that help you become more predictable, well, that might get my attention. And if there's an example of a peer or someone who's done this before, maybe you will get a meeting. But it's a high bar, and reps are under pressure to drive activity and to meet with people and to send emails and do all these other things. And quite frankly, it's a waste of time and it's a waste of effort, I have to sadly say.
I got 3 of those this morning. They landed in my inbox. All right. I have one in LinkedIn, two in my inbox of email. And I'm like, you don't know me. You don't know they're pitching me things. I don't even, one of them, I didn't even know what they were pitching. Right. But it was kind of like, so that would explain the 1 out of 100 that you were talking about, right? Because people are not taking the time to understand the why they should be even sending this. I want to plug this in there, John, because you just said something that I think is so invaluable to people. And I'm not sure they got it. And by the way, thanks for plugging the podcast. I really appreciate it. I'll send you that $200, I promise. But you said something like last year, priorities would have maybe been different than they are this year.
That's right.
And I find and have found over the years that salespeople get into this rut thinking that, oh, well, that's what we knew 5 years ago and it's still here today.
Oh,
but
yeah.
What you're saying is this is dynamic. It's ever changing. And we as sales professionals must be up to date with this ever changing process. And therefore it's incumbent upon us to actually keep continued education, if you will, to go forward.
I love it. And, another thing that just popped into my mind too are your customers. Like, this is a great opportunity if you have customers to speak to them, because you can, they're a customer, they're utilizing what you're doing. You can probably have a conversation. And what a great opportunity to just say, hey, re-engage with them and say, how are we doing? And then use that as an opportunity is like, what are your priorities and what are you seeing in the market? It's one of the reasons why I love to go on sales calls with my reps, because that's how I learn what's going on out there. I have a term that I use called the truth is in the field. I love going on executive calls because, it's an opportunity for me to say, hey, what are your priorities? What are you working on? What are you seeing? What's happening out there? And we as executives all love to know what's happening with our peers and with other industries. And the more I do that, the more I learn, the more I can bring value. Like somebody who comes to me who said, hey, I've spoken to 15 CROs in the past 6 months. This is what's happening. This is what I'm hearing from them. Are you dealing with this? Odds are they are. And it's another way, not only the rep, but the manager of the rep. This is where managers can really provide value as a coach and counselor and sales strategist, is by going on these calls with the reps and talking to executives and kind of taking that executive, what are your priorities? What are your worries? Not what keeps you up at night, because everything keeps me up at night. That's a trite question. The question is, what are your priorities? What are you expected to deliver? What are the metrics and measurements, and how are things changed for you? What are you seeing in the marketplace dynamics? This all is gathering intelligence, and it's a different, Doug, it's a total different approach than what I've seen over the past 5 years of growth at all cost, jam a product or a technology or a tool into something, put the points on the board. Don't teach salespeople how to really be consultative. Yep. And to think about business. That's how the world has changed. And quite frankly, that's why I've almost tripled my investment in enablement, because I think that's how we're going to win in the market, both in the short term and the long term.
I firmly agree. And the reason behind that is because the market shifted. We're now, years ago, companies relied upon the salespeople as the main exchange for information. Mm-hmm. The salesperson was coming in to be the expert to demonstrate that expertise.
That's right.
Now they know 70% about what they want to talk about prior to the salesperson even engaging. So
they do.
we on the sales side better come up to speed very quickly, or we're going to be commoditized in that process and like, hey, you don't know what you're talking about type kid, right? So,
Right.
And I love the fact that you said customers, because customers are going to tell you the good and the bad.
That's right. That's right.
And does it work? Well, I'm going to plug something I did here. So I did exactly that strategy, John, on a client, and I went back to my previous customers because I like to stay in touch with them because I just like to be friends anyways.
Yeah.
But I was in a particular area. I was in California actually. And I said, I'm going to be there. I said, geez, can I take you out to lunch? And they said, sure. We got talking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, guess what we discovered? We discovered there was a challenge, but an opportunity within their company to grow.
Yes.
And when I was doing full-on consulting, they hired me for $180,000 consulting job out of the process, just because I cared enough to ask them the question.
Yep.
And so I also found, John, that we could do this with our customers' competitors as well.
That's right.
Last question. By the way, again, we're speaking with Mr. John Turner. I have two questions, actually, John.
Good. Let's go. I love this.
To this Chief Revenue Officer from FinancialForce. I know people are thinking, what does FinancialForce do? Could you kind of tell them?
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing of what FinancialForce does. And this is actually something I learned. We're in the professional services automation area. And I've led professional services organizations. I've led services organizations. I've also led pre-sales services teams as well, sales teams. And one of the biggest issues when leading those teams is, how do you make sure you have the right person at the right place at the right time working on the right project? How do you make sure you're gaining the revenue opportunity from the engagements you're in? And what's surprising to me, and how I've always done it, is through spreadsheets, homegrown applications, and it's completely ineffective. It's completely inefficient. So if you have a services organization, you're probably not using great tools, nor do you have access to great tools. FinancialForce grew up on the Salesforce platform. So we're part of the Salesforce platform, and our customers are all Salesforce customers. That if you have a services organization, we can put in place technology that will make sure that when you do a scoping project, a services project, you can assign the right people with the right skills at the right time at the right price for your clients and for your customers, and all the way from the quote of the project all the way to the collection of the funds. All is managed through our technology. And what's interesting about it is we actually have a value team that works with our prospects to look at how they do it today versus benchmark and best practices. Every single time we find either cost savings or revenue opportunity, what we call revenue leakage, because of free services, unbilled services, unmanaged services that get provided to the customers. Also just wasted money as far as how resources are used and applied to projects. So it's a fascinating industry. It provides real value proposition to all the way from smaller companies with 25 to 50 services people to Fortune 10 type companies that are clients of ours. We also help smaller businesses with ERP and with financial management built on the Salesforce platform as well. So it's two problems we address, built on the Salesforce platform, one focused on services organizations, the other for enterprise resource planning and financials for smaller businesses, all with a tangible return on investment, which is one of the reasons I think we're in a good spot in today's economy.
Can I summarize it this way and say what you do increases or boosts revenue, productivity, and profitability within an organization?
Well, you get a gold star because you just took what I took in about 5 minutes and took it into 2 sentences, and that's absolutely what we do. So it's a great product. We have a very high retention rate of our customers. We have a industry leading and very high net promoter score, so high satisfaction with our customers. And like I said, and it's one of the things I'm teaching our sales force is really to what you and I were talking about earlier, to really work through a value selling process. show and demonstrate the return on investment specific to that company based on benchmarking so they can make a decision.
That leads into one of my next questions. When dealing with a C-level person, short meetings better, long meetings better, or does it not matter depending on if the value is being conveyed?
It's such a great question because here's what I appreciate as an executive. I appreciate preparation. I appreciate anything. I appreciate preparation and effective use of time. Nothing warms my heart more than when there's an hour meeting and we're done 40 minutes into it. And the rep says, hey, is there anything else we needed to do here? Because I think I can give you 20 minutes back. I think that shows a level of professionalism. And I see this with my reps sometimes where they feel like if I got an hour, I got to use an hour. The experienced reps are the ones that understand the pressures that executives are under. So whether it's a 30-minute meeting, the ones who say it's only 15 minutes, I think they're being a little disingenuous because you can't even really say hello to somebody in 15 minutes. 30-minute meetings are appreciated, but then you got to really manage it tightly. If it needs to be 45 minutes, don't think you have to use all 45 minutes. If you can be efficient and effective in 40 or 35 and get the job done, give the time back to the executive. I see reps often feel like, hey, I got 45, I got to use 45. Right. Use the time you need and also manage your time. That's the other thing I see reps doing is they'll have 45, but they won't leave 5 to 10 minutes to kind of wrap everything up. And then they get to 45. I've got 5 other meetings backed up. I got to move and they didn't get a chance to close it out. So really time management. That's why I love when reps and managers go out on calls together because it really allows kind of that management where somebody's watching the clock while the rep is managing the meeting. So 15 is too short, 30 is appreciated, but make sure your game's tight. 45 is great, hour, but if you're using those buckets of time, be thoughtful and don't use a minute more than what you need to do to get what needs to be done in that meeting.
It's well said. It's quality versus quantity. And I teach people that first step after, we get the meeting going is to set the agenda and the timeframes for what we're going to cover, right? Totally. And then you can put right in, one can put in there like, okay, we have 20 minutes for this. We end early. Great. We'll move on to the next, right? And then I love what you said though. And I think people, again, you speak so eloquently. I think some of the brilliance kind of like is there. And I don't want people to miss what you said, which was,
thank you.
Remind them that you're giving them back time, like remind them that you're going to be giving them back some of this time to use more efficiently for other priorities in the day. What person wouldn't appreciate that, right? And so that's extra conveyed value. Like if I was sitting on the executive side of the chair and somebody said, hey, great, if I can, I'd love to give you 15 minutes back in your day. Well, I mean, when I was running sales organizations and, I had people at my door left and right, 15 minutes was like an amazing amount of time to have, because then I could focus it to another priority. So I thought that was awesome. John, I really appreciate you being here. I really do. And I know everybody got a lot out of this. And if somebody wants to know more about your company or know more about you or get a hold of you, how would they do so?
Yeah, thanks for that, Doug. So if you want to get a hold of me, I'm on LinkedIn, John Turner, FinancialForce. Feel free to connect. As far as FinancialForce, www.financialforce.com. Check us out. And my email address here at work is jturner@financialforce.com. I try to answer all email and respond to everyone. I have a particular love in my heart for sales reps. I typically respond to all emails and even solicitations that don't match with a, hey, I'm not interested. Because I sat with my SDRs here. I have a group of SDRs. I've sat with them here and put the headset on. I know how hard you work. Also understand that when I give you the response, I appreciate persistence. But on the other hand, when I say no, it probably means I'm just not interested at this time. So that's how you do it. And Doug, I've loved talking to you. I think what you're doing is great. And, I just think sharing this type of business acumen and inviting people to speak about, the issues of an executive, how do you approach an executive? I am big in growth and development, which is why we're investing so much into enablement for my sales organization, because I do want to build a championship sales organization where when somebody speaks with one of my reps, they think whether I'm going to buy or not, this rep was different than the competitors because they were thoughtful, they were prepared, they were professional, they had a process, I knew where they were going, and whether I did something or not, it was a valuable interaction. And that's really my vision. It's 120 days. I hope to be here for quite a while and really do have this goal of building that type of organization. I think all my people should listen to your podcast. So I'm gonna promote it in my own organization just to learn and get perspectives of business acumen and what's on the mind of executives. So I love what you're doing and thank you for it.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you being here.
Pleasure.
Okay. Did you learn a lot? I hope so. I did. What about peer-to-peer positioning? So incredibly valuable in when you're dealing with a senior level executive, whether that's the CEO, the CRO, name your C.OO, whatever it might be. It is so incredibly important to understand to get yourself to a level where they don't view you just as a salesperson, but they view you as a respected peer. Think about it this way. Whether it's a C-level person or any person that you have dealt with in your life, don't you like to be in rapport? Don't you, ever have a conversation with the information just flowing back and forth and it seems effortless and you're just enjoying yourself and time just goes by? Well, that's because you're in peer-to-peer positioning. And I'm so grateful that John brought that forth. He brought rules other than that as well, but peer-to-peer positioning will keep you in rapport as much as anything on the table. So don't forget the other rules that he mentioned. Also, please understand you're in an ever-changing environment and you must be a student on a continuous basis. So if you are not reading, you are not looking at industries, you're not looking at the industry do's and don'ts. In other words, what's going on in the particular industry that you serve, or maybe if you don't serve a specific industry across the board, what's going on with CEOs in general, if you're targeting them, or if you're targeting chief, COOs, what is happening to the people who are in those positionings? And what do I mean by that? So, for example, if you're in an operations role, you're chief operations officer, and you're responsible for that operations of the company, what is technology doing right now to make it easier or make it harder, right? When you know as a sales rep what's going on with those folks, you can now speak a language on their level. How does it impact their job? What are they looking for from their job? What are they looking for if they own the company? A business owner may have a different level of thought than someone who has a CEO title but doesn't own the company. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm saying it's just different. And you, as the person trying to get into the relationship, should know everything about everything that you can. Think about it. If you wanted a personal relationship about someone or with somebody, wouldn't you go find out a lot of stuff? Wouldn't you just check things out? Wouldn't you try to figure out what that person's likes and dislikes were? I bet you would. Why not do that in the business context? And you can find so much information out there today because your favorite search engine and publications and industry talk, if you will, that's going on, including podcasts, as he said, John said, podcasts are invaluable amounts of information and they're free. So what's stopping you, right? It's not money. So write down right now, if you will, what are the top 3 things that will be priorities? Just as John said in the beginning, what are the top 3 priorities that your target for selling to is experiencing right now? Write down the 3 pains, write down the 3 opportunities. Maybe you have 6, and then test them. That's what he was saying. You can go talk to customers. You can go talk to, as I said, other competitors. You can go talk to different people. Test your like the old scientific method, test your hypothesis, test the process, right? If you love this subject matter and you have something that you want to bring forth that, hey, I'd like to hear something on this particular subject. Maybe you're the expert. Maybe you know somebody who's the expert. Introduce them or yourself, or just the idea, reach out to us at youmatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com. We do answer all inquiries. As John was saying, please just don't direct pitch us unless it's something of value. But reach out to us and let us know. We'd be happy to take a look at anything. And everything that fits the show, we do respond to all, whether it fits or not. And if it does fit the show, we will invite you on. If you or someone you know is looking to be in that top 1% earners category in selling or through selling, whether you own a company, whether you're a solo entrepreneur, whether you have a sales team in a major company, mid-sized company, small company, or whether you're a solo entrepreneur like a coach or a consultant or somebody that runs an agency, and you're looking to get to the top 1% earners category in your field, reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com, and let's talk about conversion strategies and revenue growth strategies and see what we can do to get you to the next level or the levels that you seek going forward. If you love this podcast, as always, I ask, please give it a 5-star review. Please tell your friends about this. Share it with people. We try to put out the best content we can possibly put out, and it does help people, and people have told us this, so we're going to continue to keep doing so. Until next time, please go out and sell something, but do it with a win-win purpose. Make someone happy, make yourself happy. When you solve someone's problem, you help them with a new opportunity, they are happy. If you do that in a win-win fashion, they win, you win, because you get paid. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. To your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.